So, some curious news to kick off with. Do you remember that World Economic Forum video, 8 predictions for the world in 2030? The one that said you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Whatever you want, you'll basically rent and it'll be delivered by drone. And the US won't be the world's leading superpower. And we'll eat much less meat. You know that video? Well, that was on their Twitter account for 4 years, and now it's recently been removed. This is likely due to the massive public backlash it received over the past few weeks. Interesting. I guess even they have realized the bad optics of actually putting their nefarious plans out there on public display. I guess sometimes it's best to keep some of these things secret, eh, Klaus? On the subject of the World Economic Forum, the deranged ideas of Klaus Schwab are now beginning to slowly be introduced into the mainstream consciousness. Here in Ireland, there's been a TV show on our national broadcaster on the second channel, RTE2, and the show is called Future Island. The second episode featured a discussion with Professor Luke O'Neill, who has been the media darling when it comes to all things COVID-19 and who has been championing the COVID-19 vaccine. And guess what they talked about?
So we're in the middle of, apparently, a fourth industrial revolution. I thought there was only one.
The fourth industrial revolution. They actually mentioned it. The fourth industrial revolution is, of course, the brainchild of Professor Klaus Schwab, the man who coined the phrase. He wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution.
I wrote a book and conceptualized the idea. I was probably the first to use this name or this definition, Fourth Industrial Revolution, as being a transforming concept, not only for businesses, but also for the economy, for politics, and for society.
And then followed up on the idea in his book from this year, COVID-19 and the Great Reset. Now, Klaus Schwab was not mentioned during this program, but the show did focus on almost all of the World Economic Forum's primary talking points and agendas. Almost like this entire program was nothing but a propaganda sales pitch for Schwab's ideas. Renewable energy was discussed at length, and comedian PJ Gallagher did a segment on self-driving cars. He was demonstrating a Tesla. He even suggested to Luke O'Neill, who doesn't drive, that this self-driving car was a good reason not to get a driving license. Well, you know, under the UN's Agenda 2030, we won't be permitted to own our own vehicles, and people will have to make use of either public transport or self-driving vehicles. The reason for this is because once they relocate people into the densely populated Stackham-high cities, the populace will not be permitted to travel to certain rural areas deemed to be ecological preservation and biodiversity zones. Humans will be living in smart cities, which are basically a euphemism for mass surveillance prison cities, policed by AIs and drones, and where everyone is tracked and monitored. Self-driving cars prevent people from having free movement to areas that the central planners of tomorrow don't want us to travel to. So the self-driving car that you're renting simply won't take you to certain locations around the country. You'll only be allowed to go to locations where humans are permitted to travel to. Free movement is not supposed to come back. Of course, those of us who've researched Agenda 2030 already know all of this, but this wasn't mentioned on the program because, you know, it's best not to reveal the whole game plan to the general public. Just win them over with the good stuff first, right? Anyway, PJ Gallagher did say the following: let's face it, this is the way it's all going to go. It's not going to take a long time. It will be illegal to drive and have fun in your car, and I will miss that too. Incredible. That's just thrown out there like it's perfectly normal. Why would we accept this? Such a suggestion is just pure authoritarianism. Well, it's going to be made illegal, so we better not challenge it because the government knows best for us. What the hell is wrong with people? We will not allow it to be illegal to drive our own car. Of course, we know that the extremely wealthy will be allowed to go wherever they want. It's just us plebs who will have our movements restricted. Why must we stand for this kind of crap? Why isn't this called out and utterly ridiculed and rejected? My concern is that the Irish people are in such a docile and highly suggestible state right at the moment. and they're so utterly compliant due to COVID that they're just programmed to do exactly what they're told, like they're nothing more than children and the government is mummy and daddy. And then this gentleman, Bobby Healy, starts talking about drone deliveries. And we know from the World Economic Forum video that I mentioned at the start of this video that the plan is for us to own nothing and to rent everything, with items we rent being delivered to our homes by drone. Now, they didn't mention the fact that we're not going to own anything in the future, but they did talk about how we're going to have all this free time. Very utopian, you know? Well, this portion of the discussion completely ties into the plans that the globalists have for us by 2030. It's truly shocking to see what was once the crazed utopian ideas of the World Economic Forum now being sold and normalised to the unwitting Irish public on the state broadcaster. The public, of course, have absolutely no idea about the dangerous Marxist communist motivations of the likes of Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. They just assume that all these fancy new toys are just natural technological evolutions and progressions that are all a product of breakthroughs in science and consumer technology. They have no idea about the actual political intentions of the elites who are pushing them on our nations as part of their plans to seize control of our societies. Gallagher then continues to talk about his experience in the Tesla self-driving car, saying that he was terrified of getting back into his car because he's back into human interaction and humans make mistakes, whereas all the self-driving cars are talking to each other all the time. I found this utterly pathetic. I'm not surrendering my car, and I'm not placing my trust in machines to run my life. Thanks very much. I reject this Internet of Things lifestyle. But of course, you can expect significant taxes to be levied on fossil fuel-powered cars in order to phase them out. The reality is, those who control the machines will determine our freedom, in the same way that those who run big tech social media companies can determine who gets to speak in the online public square or who gets demonetized, for example. Internet of Things technologies will be abused because more and more power will be placed into the hands of a few billionaires. Later, the show covered the topic of what teaching would look like in the future. This led to virtual reality, and they gave a demo of this. From what we know of Schwab's work and the World Economic Forum, and as Rosa Corey discussed in our chat about Agenda 21 a few months ago, the plan is a kind of Ready Player One society, where humans will be too risk-averse and afraid to be around each other because of the constant terror about viruses, the new abnormal world. People will think they're going to get sick by being around other people, so people will retreat into fantasy worlds, where virtual environments will feel more free and safe than the real world itself. In a dystopian, socially distant world, virtual reality will be the means by which people work, learn, communicate, and even socialize. Basically, it's the Matrix. Why leave your home, when you can just slap on a headset and live like a pod person? In his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, Schwab literally describes the COVID-19 virus as one of the least deadly pandemics the world has experienced over the last 2,000 years. And he said the consequences of COVID-19 in terms of health and mortality will be mild compared to previous pandemics, yet he still believes that COVID is an excuse to make widespread social, economic, and political changes to the world.
It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation, and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world.
Seriously, just some free advice. If you're looking to take over the world without people realizing it, maybe don't make it too obvious by having a guy who sounds like a cliched James Bond villain as your public face.
The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century.
Well, isn't it so convenient then that this virus came out of nowhere and served as the perfect excuse for you to bring about this great reset? Almost like the virus was just a cover story to crash the economy and force widespread social, economic, and political changes that you wanted all along.
It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight the severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today: polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset.
He knows only too well that a vaccine is not required. The life changes and restrictions on human movement and freedom have given governments and entities like the World Economic Forum, UN, and their partners the opportunity to reshape our lives. The lockdowns are never supposed to end, only to move along a spectrum of restrictive levels. Levels 1 to 5, for example. Normality is never supposed to return, because that would mean we'd be free again. The technologies being developed as part of the fourth industrial revolution are not meant to improve the quality of our lives. That's only the deceptive sales and marketing pitch. They're meant to create a technocratic prison for us. Sadly, most of the people shilling this revolution probably don't even realize what's behind it, and maybe those who do simply don't care about the true cost to humanity. Now, if you've seen some of my recent videos, you will know that the slogan for the Great Reset is "Build Back Better," which has been used by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, as well as the likes of Joe Biden and Boris Johnson. Even New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern has recently used the phrase.
There is much work to do. We will build back better from the COVID crisis.
They're all suspiciously singing from the same hymn sheet. Our political class are merely puppets for the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and they're all following the same script when it comes to their approach to dealing with COVID, climate change, and the economy. The global communist New World Order coup is taking shape in order to usher in Klaus Schwab's fourth industrial revolution. And Canada's Justin Trudeau gave the following address back in September, and it's just filled with all the buzzwords that the globalist elite are using right now. Take a listen to this.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change. Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. Canada is here to listen and to help.
On that point, just a reminder that the World Economic Forum and the United Nations signed a strategic partnership framework in June of 2019, last year. The UN Forum partnership was signed in a meeting held at United Nations headquarters between UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and World Economic founder and executive chairman Klaus Schwab to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The article continues, the partnership identifies 6 areas of focus: financing the 2030 Agenda, climate change, health, digital cooperation, gender equality and empowerment of women, education and skills, to strengthen and broaden their combined impact by building on existing and new collaborations. It all sounds absolutely wonderful until you look into it further and realize that what they're pushing is control over absolutely everything. It is nothing more than global communism. Let's shift gears now and talk about this from the UK, from ted.europa.eu. The MHRA, which is the Medicines and Health Products Regulatory Agency, and it says, short description, the MHRA urgently seeks an artificial intelligence software tool to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions and ensure that no details from the ADR's reaction text are missed. Explanation. For reasons of extreme urgency under Regulation 32(2)C, related to the release of a COVID-19 vaccine, MHRA have accelerated the sourcing and implementation of a vaccine-specific AI tool, strictly necessary, it is not possible to retrofit the MHRA's legacy systems to handle the volume of ADRs that will be generated by a COVID-19 vaccine. So they're expecting a lot of adverse drug reactions then from the vaccine? Wow. Therefore, if the MHRA does not implement the AI tool, it will be unable to process these ADRs effectively. This will hinder its ability to rapidly identify any potential safety issues with the COVID-19 vaccine and represents a direct threat to patient life and public health. Reasons of extreme urgency. The MHRA recognizes that its planned procurement process for the Safety Connect program, including the AI tool, would not have concluded by vaccine launch, leading to an inability to effectively monitor adverse reactions to a COVID-19 vaccine. Events unforeseeable. The COVID-19 crisis is novel, and developments in the search of a COVID-19 vaccine have not followed any predictable pattern so far. Read that again. An AI software tool to process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions. Again, two phrases. Expected high volume and adverse drug reactions. I'm just going to leave that with you right there, and we'll move on to the next story. This is back to Ireland. This article is from the Roscommon Herald. Roscommon Village completes first COVID-19 community testing trial. The ROCU Group has completed a successful community rapid testing program for COVID-19 involving the village of Lecaro in Roscommon. The village is the first in Ireland to trial weekly rapid COVID-19 screening as part of the Health Passport Ireland pilot programme, with 150 residents participating over a 6-week period. The system was trialled in a rural community setting to demonstrate how it can safeguard the health and well-being of local residents and their families. You remember the Health Passport Ireland, right? Which I discussed a few times now. The app that will allow you to travel and go about your life. And without it, you presumably can't. It'll store your recent test results and your vaccine status. The pilot program was conducted on a voluntary basis, with a clinical team present to administer weekly tests at a drive-through facility on the grounds of the local church. The pioneering healthcare technology enabled residents to receive their test results securely and privately within 15 minutes via their Health Passport app, which was followed by a phone call from the on-site doctor. In total, over 1,000 rapid tests were carried out during the trial period, with 7 positive cases detected from 150 residents who showed no symptoms and would have otherwise not been tested. Boy oh boy, so it seems the agenda marches on. Anyway, this next article is from the Daily Mail. Britons who test negative for COVID should wear paper wristbands to show they don't have the virus. Britons who test negative for coronavirus should be told to wear paper wristbands to show they do not have the virus, government advisors have said. A nudge unit. Like we're sheep on a farm getting nudged with a cattle prod. This is how little they think of us. The Behavioural Insights team, Behavioural Insights team, how can we modify people's behaviour? Not in any way dystopian and Orwellian or anything. The Behavioural Insights team, also known as Number 10's nudge unit, said the bans could act as an incentive for people to get tested. What does this remind you of? Well, I saw something similar to this in the trailer for the new film Songbird, which is about a virus called COVID-23.
Tensions rise as we enter the 213th week of lockdown.
A grim new reality emerges.
COVID-23 has mutated.
Beginning thermal scan. Thermal scan normal.
A horrifying new development
New
today.
data confirms the virus attacks the brain tissue.
Hey, whoa, I'm immune! I'm immune!
Definitely not predictive programming or anything. Anyway, to conclude this video, it is truly extraordinary to see all of the predictions myself and others have made over the past few months now gradually being implemented and normalized to the masses. Ideas that we were told we were conspiracy theorists for even entertaining. Now, as the public absorb, adapt to, and normalize these ideas, we will still be called conspiracy theorists, but this time for implying that there's anything nefarious about them. As more time elapses and the public become more accustomed to living under this new tyranny, they will accept more and more restrictions on their freedoms and more ridiculous rules and regulations. It may become more difficult for us, at least in the short to medium term, to argue for a total restoration of all of our rights and freedoms. The next manufactured crisis is that of climate change, which the COVID restrictions just so happen to also serve, as COVID lockdowns and restrictions work to accelerate the policies of the climate agenda.
We know now that the next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
Over the coming years, the global populace are to be buffeted back to periods of worrying about imminent viral outbreaks and pandemics, to worrying about things like food shortages, supply chain breakdowns, and rising carbon emissions. So right now, people are being conditioned into getting used to having their rights and freedoms restricted based on the government and the media obsessing about rising PCR case numbers. A scary graph or data model that a so-called expert tells them is justification to limit public and private gatherings, cancel holidays, locking people down and closing businesses. There's even been a suggestion that Christmas could be delayed until the end of January. That was a recent suggestion made by Professor Thomas Ryan here in Ireland. But eventually, I suspect that the global populace will be told to live in fear of more scary graphs and data models about climate change and all of the rising CO2 levels, in the same way that they're currently being told to worry about COVID-19 PCR case numbers. So rights and freedoms will be further curtailed because of more scaremongering. By providing people with sufficient amounts of bread and circuses, i.e. generous COVID welfare payments and entertainment on television, most people have been made compliant and willing to surrender their freedoms without much pushback. I never thought humanity collectively would expose itself as being this naive and weak-willed, but 2020 has taught us a great deal about a great many people. Things we never previously thought possible are now part of day-to-day living. We've been told that wanting our freedoms and lives back is selfish, but mere existence is not living. Having a social life, making plans for the days and weeks ahead, meeting new people, taking holidays, having nice meals out with friends and family in restaurants, being able to venture out into the countryside without having to answer to a policeman at a checkpoint, enjoying one's hobbies, going to the gym, having a pint in the pub, visiting friends without having to worry about how many people are in the house, having the freedom to run one's business, visiting an elderly loved one. All of these things, and so much more, are literally what it means to be alive. To truly live life. The world that Klaus Schwab and his cronies have foisted upon humanity is simply existing as a joyless, purposeless, fearful automaton who simply follows government orders and ever-changing mandates. Governments who are little more than middlemen for global elites that no one elected. The globalists, who see us as nothing more than cattle anyway, have decided that they no longer require a large human workforce. In the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the plan is that there will be an enormous amount of automation, and in many sectors of the economy, human beings will be made redundant. Massive corporations will dominate and have monopolies due to the destruction of small to medium businesses and the fact that the middle class will have fallen into poverty. State dependence will increase as so many people will be out of work. There will, of course, still be a need for some humans in jobs that can't be done by artificial intelligence and machines, such as certain tech roles that maintain and serve the green economy. But given the fact that the global elites will see many of us as surplus to requirements in their new world order, one wonders if that's the reason why they want to make it mandatory for every person on the planet to take a rushed experimental RNA medicine. I'll leave you to mull that one over. But every day, I become slightly more encouraged that more and more people are hearing about these things. Things like the slogan, Build Back Better, and what it truly means. They're discovering things like the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and what they truly entail. And they're not liking what they're hearing and seeing. Public sentiment towards a mandatory vaccine is going down right now like a lead balloon on most social media platforms. Now, we knew this for a long time, but a lot of the normies did not want to wake up to this reality. And now they're starting to wake up to it. They don't like it. The implementation of a cashless society is also not going to go over well with many industries that rely on cash, and justifications for it being outlawed will be subject to a lot of ridicule. The elites have wanted a cashless society for years. I've talked about a cashless society long before COVID, and now suddenly they're going to rush us into this cashless society because the virus can live on cash, but not on newspapers. right? Not on the newspapers of the mainstream media. Give me a break. The demonic, narcissistic psychopaths who run this world are unable to understand human emotions, and they cannot empathize with normal people. They can't relate to us. So, they try to understand us from the outside in order to control us by using things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data analysis of our social media activities and shopping habits. They employ think tanks with psychologists who carefully develop propaganda to influence the public's thoughts and modify their behavior. They can map every part of the human genome, study us like a laboratory experiment, break us down to numbers and bits of data, distill human consciousness down to the physical and tangible, chemicals and neurons. They try to simplify us to being nothing more than biological robots that can be replaced by machines that they control. They see us as an infection, a plague that has consumed the planet, a virus that has spread across the world and is damaging the environment by merely breathing. But none of these things give them an insight into the human soul. They can't measure it, quantify it, or destroy it. And it is perhaps this that they fear more than anything, the human soul. It's why they employ social distancing as a tactic to keep us apart, to stop us from uniting against them, and to lower our social trust amongst each other. Because you see, the globalists are united in their plans against us, and they know that if we were as united as they are, we'd destroy them. They consider their morality, their plans, and indeed their lives as superior and more worthy of survival and continuation than ours. But in truth, this is all projection. They are in fact the virus. They are the cancer that is eating away at our world. The globalists and wannabe technocrats, for all of their money and power, cannot be fulfilled spiritually because they lack our humanity and connection to the transcendent. Our mere existence is a deeply painful reminder to them of how utterly empty, degenerate, and hideous they are. With much less material resources than they have, we're able to build authentic lives of meaning and happiness, when they leave us alone, that is. This has to be infuriating to them. So they seek to rule us, enslave us, and even destroy us in order to justify their existence and to try to extinguish the beauty in others that they lack within themselves. They may not even be fully aware that they're doing this on any conscious level, but this destructive desire motivates their thoughts and actions nonetheless. They develop ideologies, systems of governance, political philosophies, and policies that they believe will usher in a future utopia, a better world in their minds. And the reason they pursue these utopian visions is because of their own insecurities, incompleteness, and deep-seated inferiority. They cannot fix themselves, so they therefore project their inadequacies onto the rest of the world around them. They turn their attentions onto everyone and everything around them, even looking upon the planet and its inhabitants as sick, dying, and in need of their protection and assistance. Or in the case of transhumanism, the need of artificial enhancement and prosthesis. For decades, they've used the media, Hollywood films, and academia to push notions about how the world is broken and how humanity is guilty of ruining everything, how we must be punished for our crime of mere existence and prosperity. So they take advantage of our better natures and our desire to not hurt anyone else. They manipulate us into feeling things they can't, like guilt and shame. But all of the emotions they make us feel are always negative. Fear and terror and anger and hate. They never try to make us feel joy, because that's not something they can even feel themselves. Our smiles and displays of affection and love sicken them so much that they separate us from our loved ones, torture our elderly, cutting us off from them and forcing people to cover their faces with masks so that expressions of joy and happiness can be hidden. This is why they promote fear. It's to demoralize us, to make us lose the will to continue, to harden our hearts against each other and break our spirits, to destroy the bonds that unite us. This way they will make us feel as empty, hollow, and hopeless as they are. Misery loves company, after all. And this is ultimately why they will lose, because although there is no end to the dark depths within these demonic elites, the human soul, on the other hand, does have its limits. There is only so far it can be pushed. Only so much people will take. These people do not know when or how to stop themselves. This is why they are pushing too hard and too fast to implement their plans to control everything. As time passes, they must begin to let their true intentions enter the mainstream and permit their actual agenda to be seen by all. The pretext of a virus or climate change or food shortages or whatever will eventually have to be slowly put aside as the public begin to grapple with the reality of the horrific world that they wish to build for us. And it is at this point that the momentum that we have sorely lacked these past 8 months will at last shift in our favor. 2020 was merely the first part of a 2-part story. The globalists have had it all their own way up until now. But I predict that 2021 will be the moment when our side starts recording significant victories. This charade is a house of cards, and though the lie has been big enough and repeated long enough to convince a lot of people around the world, it's also unsustainable and laced with desperation, and it's being chipped away by more and more people realizing that they've been sold a hoax. The vast majority of the public may have complied with the ridiculous mandates up until this point, but severe limitations on individual civil liberties for those who refuse to take a mandatory experimental vaccine is likely going to be a step too far for even those who have bought into the lie for the past 8 months. I know things have been dark these past few weeks, but we're all going to have to dig that little bit deeper. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Do not lose the faith. We will win this in the end.